Welcome everybody. My name is Maggie Rice. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the education coordinator here at NEOC, which stands for Northeast Ohio Coalition for the Homeless. NEOC's mission is to dismantle the root causes of homelessness while loving our diverse community. And we do that through advocacy, organizing, education, and street outreach. So today we're here to get a little bit of education about some organizing and advocacy efforts that have been undertaken by the Homeless Congress. And they have been working on drafting legislation for the Homeless Bill of Rights in Cleveland. This is legislation that has been passed and implemented around the country. And so we're hoping that Cleveland can be next, right? We need Cleveland to catch up. And so we're going to hear from several of the Homeless Congress leaders now, both about their lived experience, having experienced discrimination based on their housing status. And then we're going to hear a little bit about some of the language of the bill and what it means. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce my friend Dale, who works here at NEOC and is also a Homeless Congress leader. Dale has been involved with this process. You want to join me, Dale?
Yeah.
All right. And he's going to share some of his story with you about facing discrimination because of homelessness.
I'm Dale. I want to mention, there was a time in my life when I had quite a nice set of investments, bank account, my own business for 18 years. And then I found myself homeless. It can happen to anybody. So I was homeless for about 5 years. And I didn't like sleeping in the shelters because basically I didn't find them safe. I found the conditions horrible. Very dirty, not clean, not sanitary. So I chose to sleep outside for 5 years. Once in a while, I'd find a couch or a floor to sleep on, but primarily it was outside. And I usually used parks or churches, particularly Catholic churches, because they have nice little cubby holes and places where outside where you can sleep safe and unaffected. So in the parks, I usually slept under picnic tables to hide, to be unobtrusive, inconspicuous. However, there were times where park security would call police. I would get chased out. I'd have to go back into the park. That's the only place I'm going to go stay for the night, and then very cleverly hide from security. I wasn't allowed to sleep in a park, a public park. Also, there was a time a lot of people who experience unhoused situations will dumpster dive. I used to have to dumpster dive sometimes for food, and being a smoker, that also is something that causes a lot of us that are homeless. You look in ashtrays and places outside bars where people throw away cigarettes, maybe they've taken a hit. Yeah, it's embarrassing, it's shameful, but when you're addicted to cigarettes, that's what you do. And one night, I was in front of a library looking for cigarettes in an ashtray, and someone had called the police. 2 cruisers showed up, 4 officers. They asked me my name, asked me what I was doing. Embarrassingly, I told them what I was doing. They ran my ID through their system. I think probably 3 different systems. It took about 10, 15 minutes for them to run the ID. And while they were running it, they searched me full body. I had a coat on. I don't know if they thought I had a weapon. I told them I didn't. And after about a half hour of 4 officers being there for a guy looking for a cigarette on the ground, they found that my record was clear and let me go with a stern warning. The thing is, the Bill of Rights would prevent silly things like that from happening. I think that the police have better things to do and more important things to do than to harass someone who may have not even been homeless. I could have been any kind of person doing what I did, but unfortunately, I looked homeless to them. The Bill of Rights is really important. We've worked really hard on that. I hope you'll support us. Thanks.
Thanks, Dale. Yeah, that's really important to note that not only is Dale's life impacted, right? And so many times we see a much worse outcome, right? Particularly for people of color, Black people in particular, see a much worse outcome than what Dale experienced, but he was still obviously traumatized by that event. And on top of that, it was a huge waste of public resources. And so we need to get these protections in place to make the whole community better. Next, we're going to hear from Mildred. Dale shared his experience living unsheltered, and Mildred is going to share a little bit of her experience living in the shelter and discrimination that she faced there.
Hello, I'm Mildred L. Dixon. The first night I stayed in Norma Her was sometime in July 2017. Frontline was there then. I slept on 2 chairs because of overflow. Later, I got a room with 3 other residents. At this time, I had recently become homeless and only had some things. But the thing is, I got some clothing, very nice clothing from Westside Catholic and Cosgrove. And some of the Norma Her staff heard me talking about that, and they decided they were going to rip me off. And as it so happened, that's what they did. When I came back from a weekend with family, less than the 3 mandated nights, I found that my locker was broken into and the lock was cut off. They stole my socks, JCPenney work shirt, and everything I had. As soon as I saw it, I knew that something wasn't right, and the staff wasn't bound. And at that time, I also lost my bed. Now, afterward, I was forced to sleep on the cafeteria floor. I declined the room when offered because I felt it would be easier for them to rip me off. After a year or so, I did take a room. By this time, I had 2 luggage carts, and I felt safer about my belongings since I could lock them. In 2019, a woman who was around 75 years old moved into my room with beautiful clothes, gorgeous. Staff took note of this and immediately wound up stealing her coat, boot, 2 wigs, bras and panties, and other things. When I and other roommates came in that evening, she calmly told us that she had nothing to wear. We were shocked. Since Cosgrove didn't have shopping that week, I went to Philomena Church on Euclid, and I got some essentials for her. A few days later, her family moved her out of it. One of my bunkies at another time, this was later, who was related to the first director of the YWCA, called the police on me. She thought she could get me arrested, and so she could steal my stuff. And so many residents got luggage carts. Norma Her responded to that by banning them from the building. I remember when I took mine out, it was terrible. Now, at True to Arms, Doubletree, where Norma Her moved us during the pandemic, my Social Security was stolen by staff. When we moved to another location on West 25th, someone stole coconut oil, staff. They were really the only ones that had access to the room besides the inhabitants. Shea butter and witch hazel. And this all happened in my room. Now, the Homeless Bill of Rights, which is very important, would prevent egregious actions such as this by staff and residents. But most of the time, in my case, 99% of the time, this was staff stealing. By formally stating such willful acts are prohibited, it sets the tone for clear valuation of resident property. Thank you, and I hope you pass the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mildred. That again is something that a lot of us take for granted, right? We believe that we have a constitutional right to protect us from unlawful search and seizure as American citizens. But why is it that someone who doesn't have housing suddenly doesn't have that right? So we want to make sure that these rights are applied to everyone, including people experiencing homelessness. Next, we're going to hear from Taraya, who's going to share another story of discrimination faced within homelessness.
Hi, I'm Taraya. I am a trans woman who lives here in Cleveland. I've been homeless since about 2015. My first time staying in the shelter was at the battered women's shelter. And I stayed there for about 6 or 7 months before I got put out because they told me that I didn't fit the criteria of the program. So I went to Norma Her, and I've been at Norma Her off and on for about 5 years. I experienced a lot of violence in Norma Her, a lot of sexual harassment from staff and clients. I've never had like a housing voucher through Norma Her or any like housing help from them. And even with me like going to get jobs and staying at different places, I haven't had any success with getting a job just because of me staying at the battered women's shelter because I was there for human trafficking. So yeah, it's a lot of things that helped me back from getting housing and employment. Yeah, I would say. Oh, the staff. The staff there they're helpful to an extent. They don't really help everybody equally. They don't treat everyone the same. Like every client that's there is get treated differently by who they are and like how long they've been there, honestly. But those are the things that I've experienced in me being homeless, and I hope you pass the bill. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we know that it can be really difficult to go out and fill out job applications, but if you have to put a shelter address on that application, you know you're not getting a call back, right? And so often there are layers of discrimination that are happening, right? People are experiencing discrimination based on race, based on gender, based on sexual orientation, based on gender identity, all overlapping on top of that underlying discrimination based on housing status. And so we want to remove that to provide one less barrier to folks who are trying to get their lives on a better track. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that that is not an easy thing to do, what you all just did. And thank you for sharing those stories with us, because, you know, a lot of us may have experienced some form of discrimination or oppression in our lives, right? But we're not all up here sharing it with the whole world. And so that is like a really meaningful gift that you shared with us to demonstrate why this bill is so important. And so we're going to hear now from a couple of other homeless Congress leaders about the language of the bill itself. They're going to read a couple of the points that they think are the most important takeaways for everybody. You will be able to read the whole summary on our website, but we want to hit a couple of the keynotes here. And so first up, we're going to hear from Gail, who's going to read a little bit about a couple of the bullet points of the Homeless Bill of Rights.
Okay. I'm Gail, and I'm going to read the right to vote, register to vote, and receive any documentations necessary to provide identity for voting without discrimination due to a person's housing status. And the number, if you feel like you're discriminated against, is 216-443-3298, and that's the Board of Elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Yeah, that's voter registration drives are something that NEOC does every year, and every year we see problems with the system. We know that people are experiencing discrimination in voting based simply on the fact that they're experiencing homelessness, and that needs to stop. So thank you for reading that. Next, we're going to hear from Lou, who's going to read out another one of the bullet points from the Homeless Bill of Rights.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Good evening. Well, today we are talking about a very big issue here. But think about this particular things we want to highlight for you to understand. This is a very important bill for you to offer your support. The right to use and move freely in public spaces, including but not limited to public sidewalks, public parks, public transportation, and public buildings, and without discrimination or harassment from law enforcement officers or other officials on the basis of housing status. To tell the truth, lots of time, it's not only homeless people getting harassed, even being arrested for something as trivial as we will consider you waste the public resources. You have people I have witnessed, they probably just came out today in a hurry. They didn't dress up the best, or today is their bad hair day. They have been harassed just because people think they are homeless. But actually, I know they actually rented a downtown apartment, expensive. So Here we are talking about the people living in this community should have the same rights. If people having a house or renting a good apartment can walk down the sidewalks to look at the garbage can without being harassed, then what other people should? Think about that.
Thank you, Lou. Yeah, that's such an important point too, is that even if someone is not currently experiencing homelessness, they may be perceived to be experiencing homelessness, which is similar to like disability, right? Which is currently a protected class. If someone perceives that I have a disability, even if I don't, I enjoy that protection of the protected class, so that I can't be discriminated against based on a perceived disability. And we want to see that for housing status as well. So these protections really will protect all of our community members. Thank you so much, Lou. Next, we're going to hear from Cherie, who's going to read a couple more of the points from the Homeless Bill of Rights for us.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to speak on two of the bullet points of the Bill of Rights. The right to equal treatment by all state and municipal agencies without discrimination on the basis of housing status. The right to equal treatment by all law enforcement agencies, including the right to be free from searches or detention based upon actual or perceived housing status.
Thank you, Cherie. Yeah, that's something certainly that Mildred demonstrated the effects of, right? Wanting to know that we can have privacy, that we can maintain our own personal property. That's something that most of us take for granted. But suddenly, if you lose your housing, your personal property is not considered your own anymore, and you don't have that right to privacy. So that's something we want to see stopped for sure. Yeah, and so thank you all for sharing some of that. Again, there's going to be the full list of all the protections is on our website. You can go to neoc.org and select the Homeless Congress tab and scroll down. But next we're going to hear from Mike Russell, who is an attorney at Legal Aid, who has been consulting with the Homeless Congress leaders as they draft this bill to explain what enforcement of the bill could look like from a legal perspective and to kind of help us decipher some of the legalese.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I was talking about how the bill does a couple of things. It adds housing status to a list of protected classes, characteristics that are protected against discrimination in certain circumstances, in employment, in public accommodations, and in housing. I'll talk a little bit about how they're enforced, okay? So for discrimination in employment matters, the victim could file a complaint with the Cleveland's Community Relations Board. The board would conduct an investigation and, if warranted, issue an order forcing the bad actor to comply with the law. For discrimination in public accommodations, it's a similar procedure, but with a different agency. It's Cleveland's Fair Housing Board. Under the Public Accommodation Ordinance, the board could order compliance with the law, but could also make an order so that the bad actor pays damages to the victim of the discrimination. And for discrimination in housing matters, the victim could file a complaint with the same agency, the Fair Housing Board. The board can issue the same types of remedies, issue an order, force the bad actor to pay damages, but it also has one other powerful thing it can do. The victim of discrimination in housing matters can file a civil lawsuit against the housing provider who is discriminating against them, right? And so in their lawsuit, they could seek damages, they could seek injunctive relief, that is an order for the bad actor to do something or not do something, and reasonable attorney's fees as well. So that's how a protected status, that's how the proposed Bill of Rights amends the city's current code to add housing status as a protected class in employment, public accommodations, and housing matters, okay? And it also established what we've already talked about a little bit, a list of rights to which people experiencing homelessness are entitled to, right? These are rights that the Congress thinks are necessary to protect the persons and property of people experiencing homelessness. This is the Homeless Bill of Rights. We've already heard about some of those bills or some of those rights today, excuse me. For instance, the right to move freely in public, the right to equal treatment by municipal agencies and law enforcement, the right to an expectation of privacy in one's personal property, and the right to vote. All these rights would be enforceable either by the city or by a victim whose rights have been violated by filing a civil lawsuit against the violator, right? As drafted, the proposal would allow a lawsuit, the person who files the lawsuit rather, to seek injunctive relief in order for the bad actor to either do something or not do something, damages, and also reasonable attorney's fees. I'm not going to go through all of the rights that are listed in the Bill of Rights, but I encourage folks to visit NEOC's website and read the summary of the proposal that they have there. Okay, so what does this mean in the real world, right? How does the proposal work to somebody who's been a victim of discrimination based on housing status? Well, let's say, for an example, a landlord refuses to rent to you because of your actual or perceived housing status. You could file a complaint with the Fair Housing Board and/or a civil suit against the landlord seeking damages, okay? Let's say you go to a business and the business refuses to serve you based on your actual or perceived housing status. You could file a complaint with the Fair Housing Board. What if an employer refuses to hire you, also because of your perceived or actual housing status? You can file a complaint with the Community Relations Board. The hospital refuses emergency medical care, also because of your perceived or actual housing status. You can file a civil suit against that hospital. And the Bill of Rights does, as drafted, the proposal does more than just establish these rights, right? For instance, included in the Bill of Rights is a right to social exchange, the right to give and accept food, receive services, panhandle in public places. This, while it establishes a right, it also would make it potentially more difficult in the future for the city to enact anti-panhandling or anti-social exchange ordinances, because they would have to amend current law in order to pass laws like that. So that is another potential outcome of the Homeless Congress's proposal. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you for your flexibility and rolling with the punches as we continue to receive a little bit of negative attention. This tends to happen when people speak up for their rights. And thank you everybody for bearing with us. I'll make sure to get an edited complete video of the live stream up later. And so next we're going to hear from Patricia, who is from the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, who was involved in the campaign to get the Illinois Homeless Bill of Rights passed, to speak to some of her experiences of what it was like advocating and working on that campaign. And then after that, we'll hear from someone else from the coalition about implementation.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us. We're really excited to be here because we have worked on the Bill of Rights for the Homeless Act in Illinois, both passing it and implementing it. And we're just so excited that it's something that your organization and all of you on this call are working on, because we think it's a really, really helpful tool. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our efforts to pass the bill. And Ali, my colleague in the law project of the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, is going to talk about how we have used the bill since it's been passed. And I just also want to thank so much to everyone who shared their story about their experiences and also shared information about what the Bill of Rights in Cleveland will do. It's very helpful to hear the stories and information about the Bill of Rights, which is slightly different than what we have in Illinois. So almost 10 years ago, in 2013, the governor of Illinois came to the offices of the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless to sign a state law that's the Illinois Bill of Rights for the Homeless Act. The governor of Illinois came and signed the law, which made it effective immediately, as well as many of the legislators and people experiencing homelessness all came for this bill signing ceremony and a celebration of passing the bill. And I just want to talk a little bit about that process. And one thing that I hope maybe could impart some hope to all of you is the bill that we worked on and passed in Illinois was passed in one legislative session. So what that means is the Illinois Senate and the Illinois House considered the bill and signed it all within a matter of months. The legislative sessions in Illinois are about start in January and conclude by the end of May. So all of the work to convince all of the legislators in the whole state of Illinois to pass this bill took place within a matter of months. And I think that some of the messages that we used in passing the bill could be helpful in your efforts to pass something in Cleveland. And one is just thinking about the language, the Bill of Rights for the Homeless Act. So people sort of wonder, well, what is a Bill of Rights? What does that mean? What kind of rights are protected by a Bill of Rights for the Homeless Act? And I think it's really quite broad, and it's also a matter of like fundamental fairness and equality. And the type of rights are civil rights, human rights, and equal rights. And all of those are important for people who are experiencing homelessness because they suffer so many different types of discrimination, as we've heard tonight. And I think a really important question, especially to anybody who might oppose a Bill of Rights for the homeless ordinance in Cleveland, is why should it be legal to discriminate against people experiencing homelessness? It shouldn't be. Just as a matter of fundamental human rights, it shouldn't be legal to discriminate against people who are homeless. And I think in the context of where we are right now, still dealing with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, people dealing with eviction, loss of income, loss of housing, loss of health, as a result of the pandemic, it's a very important time to have a law in place that protects people experiencing homelessness. And then just a couple of more things. As I mentioned, the bill passed in 2013. Illinois was the second state in the country that passed a Bill of Rights for the Homeless Act. And one of the things that was really important, our state includes Chicago, which obviously is a big city, but there's lots of areas of the state that are smaller towns or rural areas. And one thing that was important is to educate people who are voting for the legislation that homelessness can happen to anyone, anywhere. It's not a problem just in the city of Chicago, and anyone can lose their housing for a wide range of reasons. And nobody who experiences the loss of housing should experience discrimination. And if they do, they should have something that they can do about it, and it should be illegal. So that's a little bit about passing the law, and I'm going to turn it over to Ali, who can talk about how we've used the law in Illinois.
Thank you, Patricia. As Patricia said, my name is Ali Simmons. I am the case and street outreach worker with the law project of the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless. And as part of my, responsibilities, I go out and perform street outreach to try to assist individuals who are unsheltered with accessing services that we may provide or that other organizations or agencies may have available for individuals who are, experiencing homelessness. Some of the ways in which this particular bill has been used is largely around like cleanings. That's like one of the biggest, things that individuals who are, unsheltered, uh, face oppression, through. We found that, the cleanings, even though they are like sometimes called cleanings, they are actually like displacements of whole encampments. And a lot of the times it might not even be a one cleaning process. It might be continuous cleanings used to harass folks, makes them, they require them to move their belongings so that they can come through and clean or power wash. And a lot of times they are required to get up early in the morning or do this the day before so that, all of their stuff will be safe and secure so that, nothing can be thrown away when the cleaning starts. And a lot of folks find that this is kind of like overwhelming for them, especially if they are out there with, a lot of, their personal belongings. They feel like they shouldn't have to, move their belongings for there to be a cleaning, or they may feel that, there's not, adequate cleaning being done so that, they don't have to, face these cleanings on a regular basis. There's a lack of garbage cans being, supplied to folks. And all of these are things that we kind of like advocated for, to lessen, the impact of cleanings. We've used the bill, against displacements, obviously. We have also worked with the city and park district on, not displacing folks that, they otherwise would have displaced. There's actually, efforts to create policies that respect the folks who are unsheltered, governing, the cleanings, notices that have to be posted before cleaning can be conducted. What else? Okay, I think I wanted to share about two particular cases as well that we were involved in. One was around a cleaning. Individual was unsheltered for a while, had a lot of belongings. A lot of them were like sentimental to him, had medications that, he needed to, basically sustain his life. And at a cleaning one day, Streets and Sanitation just threw away all this stuff. And we were able to connect with, well, actually, this individual heard about us and he reached out to us and connected with a former attorney, Diane. And that began his case and it was successful. There was another case where a couple unsheltered, living on the streets, chased from one area to the next by Streets and Sanitation, city officials. They suffered like property being thrown away, being forced to move. They were successful also in a lawsuit that they brought against the city under this particular bill. Patricia, if I left anything out, please.
No, that's great, Ali. And I was just going to say, in addition to court cases, and we've brought several court cases under the Bill of Rights for the Homeless Act, just having the act in place is really helpful when we're advocating with the city or other government agencies about an action that they might take, and we can advocate and say that violates the law, that violates the Bill of Rights for the Homeless Act, and without even having to bring it in court, we're sometimes successful in getting that negative action stopped.
Yeah, and one final thing also, I think having this bill also like provides individuals who are unsheltered with some kind of like comfort because they are aware that there is something in place to kind of like stop some of the things that's happening to them. So it works. It definitely works.
That's so great to hear. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your story of working on that and then implementing it. Oftentimes when we're facing these big advocacy pushes, we're like, well, what is it going to look like in practice, right? We hear all the time, oh, that's a pipe dream. You're thinking too big. You can't possibly get that here. Or we hear that might work in New York City, or that might work in San Francisco, but it's not going to work in Cleveland, right? But if Chicago can do it, another Midwestern city, I believe we can do it too. And so, yeah, thank you so much for sharing the evidence of that, and hearing those stories, those success stories definitely inspires me to push even harder on this. And just having heard from all of the Homeless Congress leaders as well, I hope you all were as moved as I was by some of that. It's just unimaginable to think that rights could be snatched away without a thought in that way. So we really need to make that stop. And so on that note, what we're asking folks to do today is to sign a petition that the Homeless Congress leaders have gotten. And I know Cherie and several other people over there have been furiously collecting signatures, physical signatures on paper. And now we're ready to go digital with it so we can get an even further reach. And I think David is going to put that in the Facebook comments. Since we're no longer on Zoom, we're only on Facebook, we'll put it in the comments. Of course, we're going to be sharing it on social media and via email to all of our lists as well. And so we'd like to invite you right now to take that step with us. And we will sit here together and fill out this very short petition demanding really that the local representatives at the city council introduce this legislation, put it through committee, and pass it. We know that there has been some advocacy ongoing with the city council, right? We know that they have the ability to introduce this. We know that there is some support for it, but we really want to push them in that direction. So if you can take a moment to click that link and sign the petition, that would be very helpful for us. And I'll give you just a quick minute to do that. All right, it looks like we're already getting some signatures. We appreciate you all. I know the people in this room definitely are signing it, as well. We've gotten some support from other agencies, and we'll continue to post those supporters on our website. If you want more information about the Bill of Rights, if you want to read the rest of the summary that's available, you can go to neoc.org and select the Homeless Congress tab from the top of the screen there. And about halfway down, you'll see the summary of the Bill of Rights. And so now I'm going to go and see if there's any questions in the comments. Let's see here. Some technical difficulties. All right. I don't see any major questions. Yes, if you live in a suburb, you can absolutely sign a petition, right? We know that folks come in from the suburbs and utilize public spaces downtown. And so, we know that a lot of times, unfortunately, the voices that are calling for the exclusion are coming from that corner. So we definitely still want you to make your voice heard as well. In the meantime, I'm gonna stop the live stream, but folks can continue to ask questions, and we can type our responses on Facebook as well. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Well, thank you.